Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cheese, a photography podcast. I am your host, Jose Betancourt. Now, last week, I did not bring out an episode. Of course, it was Christmas time, so happy holidays. And in a few days, New Year's is upon us. So I wanted to just give an update as to what's going on with this particular podcast. I am going to have more hosts, and hopefully those particular hosts are going to be permanent. So instead of listening to just one single host, you're going to have a nice combination of characters and talented photographers and super interesting individuals to listen to. Not that I'm not talented or interesting, but as someone who listens to podcasts and as someone who has been in podcasting for close to 14 years, I understand that variety is very important when listening or just consuming entertainment, whatever it is. Variety is always great. So there will be, starting next year, very, very early next year, maybe 4 hosts, including myself. So I'm adding on 3 additional hosts to this podcast. We might change the name. This is a very, very young podcast, so the name might change. I know it's catchy. That is why I came up with the name Cheese, because when we are taking photos, everyone says it. It's very universal. So maybe I'll keep it. Who knows? Once the other hosts come on board, we will brainstorm and see what we can do for the name, whether we keep it or not. So that's the plan for Cheese, a photography podcast. And hopefully you guys, well, as a matter of fact, I know you guys are going to enjoy it. These particular gentlemen are so awesome, and I can't wait to podcast with them. So that's where I'm at right now. On the photography standpoint, well, from a personal standpoint with photography, I have been taking more landscapes and architecture shots. If you follow me on Facebook, I have been taking photos in the park, just trying to take, mainly practicing on taking less photos, but composing so that I can do as little editing from a balance or cropping standpoint. Now, I shoot in RAW with my GFX, so colors are always going to be post-production. But composition-wise and setting up so that I can do as little editing in cropping or balancing, leveling, in other words, I just want to get that right in the camera. And if the colors look great, I can just use that straight out of the camera. Now, I don't set up my GFX 50R for JPEG. So maybe one day I will. Maybe I'll get shooting strictly in RAW out of my system. Now with my X Pro 1 and my Fuji X-H1, I do fine JPEGs and RAW. So maybe I'll do that with the GFX down the line. But I just feel that I want all that information, and I want to manipulate the colors and white balance to my liking. But I just feel that there are still plenty of basic techniques that I need to learn. And as someone who is giving advice through a podcast and YouTube videos, I advise you, instead of looking at the newest cameras, instead of watching people on YouTube or listening to people on podcasts talk about the latest and greatest cameras, practice the small things. Practice composition. Practice using light. Just practice the small things. That is going to separate you down the line from the plethora of photographers that are out there. If you look at Instagram, if you look at Facebook pages, everyone is taking photos, which is great. But if you want to stand out, do it right the first time and forget post-production Now, for me to say that, knowing that I just said that I like to edit my colors and white balance, so let me rephrase that. I mean, don't depend on post-production for everything. If you have to do simple edits, sometimes I use Snapseed on my phone, on my iPhone 10, whatever it is. I think they're up to 11. I'll put the raw files on my phone from my GFX. And sometimes I'll edit on Snapseed, which is a free software from Google. And it does a pretty good job. And it will edit in RAW. So it will keep that RAW file and won't convert it into a JPEG. So you can also make a copy of that particular edit. So if you don't want to get rid of the original, you can keep the original and just make a copy of the edited version. So there are times where you need to do a quick edit. But don't depend on taking a shot, or don't go out there with the mentality of taking a shot and thinking, okay, I'm going to edit that later. Just try to practice the very basics. That is going to take you very far in your photography journey. So that wraps up today's episode. As always, I appreciate you guys listening and watching me on YouTube. So until next time, I am Jose Betancourt. Talk to you later. And Happy New Year.